Good morning. Thanks for joining us here this beautiful, is it Thursday morning, right? Chris Worden.
Andy Jones-Wilkins.
And I'm Aaron Barber.
And we're here to talk about the most recent race in the Sonoran Desert Cup, the McDowell Mountain Frenzy 25K. First off, I mean, we were all out there. Obviously, we were live streaming, and Aaron, you were directing. I have to say it was one of the most beautiful days for a trail run I can think of.
Yeah.
Oh, man, the conditions for running were perfect. Very little breeze, not a cloud in the sky, just a lot of really happy people.
Yeah.
And not even too cold in the morning. That was usually out there at that race. It gets in the 30s, and we're huddled around heaters. And the heaters were still there, but not necessary for everyone.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's one of the things about December in the desert is that sometimes you get those really cold mornings, and then it still gets up to 80-plus degrees. We didn't have that. We had a very narrow band of temperature this weekend, and it was really enjoyable. I mean, I didn't have to throw on a puffy. I also wasn't melting later that afternoon when we went out for our run.
Agree. I think if you were to dial up a day to encourage folks to come out to the desert, and run in December, that would be the day.
Absolutely.
Just fantastic.
And you can see some of that footage if you want to look back. We do have the coverage of the McDowell Mountain Frenzy on the Mountain Outpost YouTube channel. And let's talk about how things shook out there. First, let's talk about the women's race. I found it interesting that 4 states were represented in the top 8 in the women's race. We had runners from Arizona, Colorado, Montana, and Missouri all finish in the top 7, actually. Of course, led by a name familiar to people in the trail and ultra running scene, Amanda Basham.
Yeah, Amanda smashed it. So we didn't know because she didn't have her bib on.
Oh, yeah, funny story. So let's talk about that. So Amanda Basham, there was a little bit of confusion on our end.
Yeah.
And Aaron, you want to explain what happened with Amanda?
Yeah, she had changed. I found us post-race, but yeah, I had no tracking for the leader. Fortunately, Amanda has pink hair and wears a pink hat, so she's pretty recognizable. So I was actually watching the live stream to know who was leading the women's race in our own timing tent, and we were like freaking out, like no data on her at all. So we're kind of confused if it's a timing issue, if it's something on our end. Then she finished, and we're like, hey, what's your bib? We want to make sure it's not a faulty bib. And then she kind of had this like, oh crap, realization where she had changed shorts right before the race and left her bib on the previous shorts. So even runners like Amanda can make the beginner mistakes and forget.
No, it's funny, Chris. In the moment, we were basically saying that she was Lindsay Allison in the lead.
Yeah.
And when she got around the 10-mile mark and we had a really close-up camera, I was like, look. I've known Amanda for about 12 years. That's Amanda Basham.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like that looks a lot like Amanda Basham. Like when we were catching glimpses earlier, it's like, does Lindsay Allison have the same hair thing going on? Like, because that's kind of an identifying characteristic of Amanda. But Amanda ran the 3rd fastest time all time on that race with a 1:54.16. Lindsay Allison, as we talked about, had an amazing race as well. Lindsay. Somebody who's she finished 2nd at Crown King earlier this year. Won was it Sean O'Brien or was it the other big race that she ran this year? Lake Sonoma.
Yep.
She won Lake Sonoma 50. Came in 2nd, and Nicole Hansen on the Aravaipa Racing team finished 3rd in her first race back in about 8 months, coming back from injury.
Yep.
Nicely competitive. I want to also encourage the listeners to check out our interview with Amanda afterwards.
Yeah.
She was nice enough to come over to our tent and chat with us, and it turned out, we talked about the race for a little while, but it was really wonderful to hear about where she is in her life as a mom and as a partner to another highly competitive ultra runner, and kind of the way she's evolved as a sort of young gun upstart runner, 7-8 years ago to now a more mature runner who gets a little bit less caught up in results and kind of which race to go to, and a little bit more sort of reflective on her career, still really running well and hard and successfully. But it was a really nice sort of surprise, I think, for both of us to have that interview and have a chance to chat with her. So encourage people to check that out. I also think Brittany Lump coming in 4th was the first finisher who would qualified through to the finals in April. Megan Kupras had already had her 2 races, so I don't want to jump around a little bit, but
Sure.
4th place for Brittany was good enough for cementing 2nd place in the fall Cup standings, which is really cool for her. This is kind of what one of the goals with the Cup is valuing that sort of consistency and just showing up, and
Absolutely.
and she certainly did that.
And that happened we'll talk about that in the men's side for sure. We had a couple of people sneak in, but, rounding out the top 10, Mallory Peterson coming down from Montana, Lori Stillwell in 6th place, Jess Gwemmer in 7th from Missouri, 8th place, Natalia Jasperado, 9th place, Diana Segrist, who I believe ran all 3 of the fall races.
She did all 3.
And number 10 was Ann Swanberg, another Colorado resident. So, other states pretty well represented in the top 10 in the women's race.
Yeah, for a 25K in early December, a bunch of states in the top 10. That's cool. Again, similar to Brittany, Lori Stillwell and Dawn Segrist get a couple more points and found themselves in the. So there's your top 4 into the finals.
Conversely, on the men's side of the race, it was an Arizona sweep all the way down. You had to go pretty far down the standings to find somebody who would come into Arizona from another state. And, the top 3, actually the top 4 were names that we are quite familiar with. First place was Julian Couillou. So Julian had won Cave Creek Thriller and finished on the podium at Pass Mountain. And then wins here. So Julian will actually walk into the Damn Good Run race with a maximum point total, and also, I guess if you were to call it like a tournament, a 1 seed.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And he knew it too. Like afterwards, when we talked to him, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to come out and basically prove that I belong here.
Oh,
so.
Julian was so pumped. I feel usually he's more on the mild-mannered side when he crosses the finish line. And I was about 10 feet before the finish line, kind of waiting for him to go. So I went to give him a high five, and I swear he broke my hand. Hit it so hard. It was a big release of emotion, which is super cool to see.
Well, it was also great to have you on, Aaron, because you do some running with Devin Sharps, and the 3 of them, Julian, Devin, and Kyle, were really, for the first, more or less the first 10-mile
the whole loop,
were kind of in lockstep as a threesome. Julian not relinquishing the front spot. We chatted a little bit with him. By the way, we had outstanding mountain bike cam coverage.
That was great
on some of that kind of rolly, rocky stuff in the middle part of the 10-mile loop, and it was really it was a cool dynamic to see that going on. Every so often, Devin and Kyle would slide a little bit back, but they would come right back up, and they were clearly a group of 3 going into the end of the 10-mile loop, and then Julian just decided to sort of turn it on, and he just kind of incrementally stretched the elastic, the elastic, stretch the elastic. It really felt like a race at that moment.
Yeah, as we were watching, we basically looked at Devin and felt like he looked very comfortable, very in control. Apparently, after all was said and done, he was putting a little bit more out there than we realized.
I don't know if everyone saw on the live stream, but his last 50 yards or so, he was spewing pretty good.
Yeah, he basically had about a solid minute where he was expelling things from his body.
Exactly. He needed to clean house a bit.
Yeah.
But you gave us great perspective, Aaron, because he was in that train of 3. He's kind of shaking his arms out, and certainly from our view, and we're just looking at the 3 of them.
Yeah.
He just looked smooth and relaxed, and Julian was a little bit more, not that he looked stressed, but he was clearly on a mission, and Kyle was kind of somewhere in between. So it was kind of funny to see, and Devin, he's spewing for those final 50 meters, but then he sits down and he turns his head and unloads a little bit more. But it's cool to see these guys just kind of putting it all out there.
Yeah, Devin has proven himself in the 2 races that he ran this fall to be an excellent closer. As we mentioned at Cave Creek Thriller, I believe it was Kurt Houghton that he basically was in a dogfight with until the final half mile. And in this case, it was even closer. The margin between second and third was first of all, Julian Couillou finished in 1:42.51, fantastic time. Devin Sharps and Kyle Gallagher 1:44.35 and 1:44.42.
Yeah.
So they came in one after the other. And Cody Goodwin, a name familiar to us on the podiums here in the Sonoran Desert Cup, finished fourth, but was only about 40 seconds back from Devin.
A note on Cody. He speaking of closer, it was certainly more than a minute back when he got it when they got around close to 2 minutes back after the first 10-mile loop. So they're lucky it wasn't a 30K.
Yeah, that's true.
I talked to Cody, and he just said he wanted to run his own race that day, and he just kind of hung back on that first loop and turned on the jets at the end.
Yeah, he looked great in the second loop. Continuing down the top 10, Isaiah Ford finished in 5th. Matt Dorsey, a name familiar to us in the Sonoran Desert Cup, finishing 6th. Ryan Guiden in 7th. Kurt Houghton in 8th. Flagstaff local Ryan Kiewit in 9th. And Brian Driscoll in 10th.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations to everybody that finished in the top 10. Of course, this is a Sonoran Desert Cup race, which means that the top point getters over the course of the fall season are now invited into the Damn Good Run Championships in April here in Phoenix. And part of the qualification process is not only that you have to have the highest point totals, but you also had to place in multiple races, which adds an interesting factor because not everybody that is qualified now for the season championship is a name that we've mentioned.
That's right. Well, and remember, placing, according to the rules, is a top 20 finish.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Help me here, Aaron. A top 20 finish in two races.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you could be 19th and 20th.
Correct.
And you're in.
And for what it's worth, that would have gotten you in.
Right.
Yep. So let's get right into that. On the women's side, our top placers are no surprise. Megan Kupras, Brittany Lump, Lori Stillwell, Diana Segrist. Those four we'd seen in multiple races doing very well. In 5th place, Jackie Jacoby. Jackie's a local here, runs with the Aravaipa group runs, and but she through multiple steady results ends up in the top 5.
Yep.
I believe that her races, she was somewhere in the 4th to 6th range in her 2 races. So
Yeah, she actually was. Where we got this? 17. Yeah, Cave Creek. She was 5th place, and at Pass Mountain, she was in 16th place.
yeah. So as we mentioned, multiple races. That's what it takes. And then the final 3 qualifiers on the women's side: Teresa Moraski, Lindsay Yazzie, and Holly Boyd. Now, I know that we'd mentioned Lindsay Yazzie. I believe that she had a top 10 finish at Cave Creek Thriller, but Teresa Moraski and Holly Boyd kind of snuck in, as we mentioned, by basically running multiple qualifiers and placing.
Yep.
What were, Holly Boyd, what were her finishes that enabled her to get into the championship?
She was 17th at Thriller and 19th at Pass Mountain.
Exactly right.
There you go.
Consistency pays. So running multiple races. So even though runners such as Amanda Basham or Elsa McDonald would have higher points because they won individual races, part of the stipulation is that they had to run multiple races.
And we talked about it at the kickoff of the whole series, way back before Cave Creek Thriller, that, this has the real potential of being, kind of an every person's type of cup where, yes, at the very tip of the front, there's going to be a fair bit of, of intensity and so forth. But sometimes just showing up, putting in the work, getting the results will be enough. I will be interested to see who shows up and run. This is now that, and we'll get to the guys in a second. It's a clean slate. The fall series is over.
Yep.
These 8 women, these 9 men are in. They don't have to race a step until the damn run if they don't want to.
Yeah.
And talking to Julian, he's talking about maybe focusing on fast half road marathon or something like that. Maybe jumping into one of the spring races.
Spoiler alert, he's in Santan.
He's in Santan, so he can't help himself. On the other side of the coin, that's the point. You might want to just keep yourself sharp and just keep running these 25Ks, 30. Well, Coldwater is going to be a 40K.
Yeah.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I'm really interested to see. That's a significantly
That's
longer
a level up.
race,
Yeah.
right? And so it'll be fun to see what sort of dynamic if there's somebody in this mix who exceeds a little bit. And Coldwater's a unique environment, sandy washes. It's kind of grindy out there. I mean, I'm going to be running the 100K, but I love running out there, but it can be a rough day.
Yeah, I've run that race at Coldwater before we changed it and done some scouting stuff out there, and it's not. Yeah, it's not the fastest.
Yeah,
race.
Aaron. Aaron, you're being nice. You took over the control of the race, and you made it freaking harder.
Yeah.
Well, that seems to be something that you do. 'Cause you've done that with Frenzy, and then you've done that with Coldwater.
Exactly.
But the thing about Coldwater is, as long as you've got those sandy washes on the backside, it's still going to be pretty rough.
Yep.
So, but we'll talk about that coming up here shortly. But on the men's side, in the Sonoran Desert Cup Fall Series, we had 9 qualifiers, as you mentioned. Julian Couillou, Cody Goodwin, Devin Sharp, Kurt Houghton, Joe Boucher, Dan Roeder, Matt Dorsey, and then a couple of names that we had not mentioned at all. Jason Nelson and Craig McMillan.
Yeah, give us the numbers on those, Aaron, because I think they were sort of similar to Lindsay and Holly, perhaps.
Jason was a 16th at Cave Creek and 20th at Pass Mountain.
Right,
the last point that you could get.
right on the bubble.
And Craig McMillan was 19th and 19th.
See, that persistence pays.
That makes your point. Yeah,
I mean that's a really cool thing, I think, because that shows that you don't have to necessarily be as fast as Julian or Devin or Cody in order to get it done. You just have to show up, and the persistence is going to pay off.
And then I don't know if we've talked about the actual championship at Damn Good Run,
No,
but the format at that is it's an actual race. There's no point. Throw the points out
the
window.
points are out.
Seating's gone, and it's going to be just these folks racing against each other. So the Damn Good Run 24K will have probably 150, 200 runners in it, but it'll just be the people who qualified in the fall and the spring are going to get special bibs. So,
okay.
So it'll be a race within a race.
Race within a race.
Oh, that's
okay. So they don't have a
fantastic.
separate start or anything like that.
Nope, they'll be right in the mix of everything. But Julian, maybe he'll win overall, maybe he'll get third overall. But if he beats everyone else, he'll take the championship.
That's great. I love that.
So we've got basically 17 people qualified for the Damn Good Run Championship, and we will qualify up to 20 more in the Spring Series.
Yep.
And in that case, there are actually 4 races, but they still only have to run 2?
Yes.
Or place in 2?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Moving on to what is ahead for the Sonoran Desert Cup, and that would be
And of course, the Spring Series starts in 3 weeks.
January 4th.
goodness.
Let's
Yeah.
not.
So-
out here in the desert, January, spring.
The day after Across the Years, we will be moving into
There we go.
the Sonoran Desert Cup, and that is, back into the Spring Series, and that will be Tan Scramble, and that is a 26K. I think that's a very interesting race because it's a runner's race until it isn't.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess, Aaron, can you expand upon that?
Yeah, Santan, super flat and fast. You can kind of see just the picture on the screen there is a pretty good representation of most of the trails out there until you get to Gold Mine Climb for the 26K. So it's you get a little bit of climb and flowiness on Dynamite, but then Gold Mine it's short. It's a quarter mile, but you gain 300 or 400 feet, and it's a barely runnable. So.
And it's very crowded because it's a popular thing amongst locals that live out in Queen Creek and in Santan Valley. Like, they're out there en masse on Saturday morning.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of, kind of moving around and dodging, people who are out there for their Saturday hike.
Right.
And
then
families
even
and
the
kids.
descent on the other side, you got to have good technical downhill skills because it's chunky, and again, with the people, you're not always taking the line that you want. Sometimes you got to weave around people while you're sprinting down a hill.
And that will play into it somewhat. So it's actually, as you can see here, it's actually a double looped race. So they take the large loop first.
Yep, the 17K big perimeter loop.
And then they take the 9K loop, which is a short, very fast loop.
Yeah, that one does not have the climb on it. So they'll be hitting the Gold Mine Climb right at the end of the 17K loop. And then they'll just one fast flat.
Yeah, it's about a mile before the start finish line where they go back out. So,
well, I think too. Let's keep in mind January 4th. It's the Saturday of New Year's weekend. There could be some ringers from outside the area in town.
There
kind of
always
like seems like there's always some folks who might be in town and see. Hey, let's see if there's a race this weekend, and they could jump into this. And kind of like we've seen a little bit through the series with Elsa and then Amanda and Devin Nihill earlier, Devin Nihill's from here, but where you might just get a person or group just kind of jumping in, running a 26K. Looks like January 4th. What could be better? I remember back in the day that was always the date. The Saturday after New Year's was always the date of of Joe Gallopi's Phoenix National Trail 50 miler in South Mountain. Old timers might remember that one, but it was always a early January race, and we'd get folks like Scott Jurek and Hal Kerner and Ian Torrance in for that one. Not saying those guys would show up for this, but it is a fun sort of thing to be like, hey, it's early January. You can jump in an actual real trail race and touch dirt and have a great time. So that'll be fun. And it does, hearing you guys, I have not run those trails, but hearing you guys talk about the course, it does look like one of those kind of like Cave Creek that really tests the versatility of a runner.
Absolutely.
Right? You've got to have that running speed, but then you've also got to be able to grind out a good hard climb.
Yep. The only thing that I'd say Santan misses that some of the other ones don't is the chunkiness. It's not very rocky.
It's
out
pretty
there.
smooth.
It's like Pemberton.
very
the whole way.
runnable.
So.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I that sounds good, Chris. We'll have to do a loop of that when we're out there.
It's a thing. So actually looking at the entrant list for the 26K, I see some familiar names. I see Elsa McDonald on the women's side. I see Bryce Brooks.
Yep.
Entering on the men's side.
Oh, and look at Nathaniel Chan, our friend
Chan
from Hoka.
Yeah, Nathaniel Chan going to be stepping in. I know Matt Heacock has run several races around here pretty quick. I do believe won the 6 hour at Fat Ox this year with like a 40 miles in 6 hours. Pretty stout.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing some names from all over. Names from Georgia, from Kansas, from the UK,
from
Pennsylvania, right off the top. So
there's already some Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Look at these people escaping the cold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Julian Strava, that's he's declared for Santan on his Strava post. So
right on.
If he's not on Ultra Sign Up, we'll see him out
We'll
there.
let him run.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we've got several dozen registered. I know that by the time we get back out there, it'll be probably twice the number. We're still 3 weeks out, so we'll have a lot of drop-ins for that.
For sure.
But we look forward to previewing and then wrapping that. Then Coldwater, Elephant Mountain, Mesquite Canyon, and then finally the Series Championship.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you running any of the Spring Series races, AJW?
Well, I'm doing Coldwater, but I'm going to do the 100K.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure on the other two because I'm also doing Black Canyon 50K and Crown King in my build up to Cocodona.
Yeah, I've got a pretty
You've got a pretty big
robust
build up.
season.
Yeah. Are you doing any of the Spring Series?
I believe I'm doing the 40K at Coldwater.
Okay.
I'm doing the. I don't think I'm doing the. I think I'm doing the 22K at Elephant Mountain. Maybe the 35K. I'm doing the 30K at Mesquite Canyon, which is
nice.
going to be painful. It's such a hard race.
Yes.
And I'm doing Crown King. I'm doing Black Canyon 50K, Whiskey Basin. I'm not going to be racing Damn Good Run because I'll obviously be covering it. But I've got a pretty robust season this spring. So, I'm going to be spending some of my spare time paying attention to what's happening in the Sonoran Desert Cup.
It was. I got to say, this was our first live stream of McDowell Mountain Frenzy, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was.
There were 800 runners
in our interview with Jamil. He's like, I love this. We just pop up a tent and crank up the cameras and recruit some mountain bikers and have some drones flying around, and there we go. We have a live stream.
Super easy.
Yeah. Piece of cake, right?
he says as he is basically the maestro of everything.
His words were, I don't know, guys. This seems like we should do it every weekend. I was like, totally. We looked at each other like, nah.
Yeah. So we'll be back to preview that race in a few weeks. In the interim, we will actually be out here this weekend at Desert Solstice. Of course, a completely different format. It is a unique format. Some people, it's not their cup of tea, but you and myself, are you going to be out there at all?
I'll actually be down in Tucson for the marathon.
For the Tucson Marathon, because Aravaipa can't just put one race on a weekend. You got to put on two races. So. So if you want to tune in to Desert Solstice, you can check us out in the Mountain Outpost channel. But
and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but a couple weeks later, for the first time, we'll be live streaming from across the years.
That's right.
One of the 6-day, the 72-hour, the 48-hour, the 24-hour, the 100-miler, the last person standing. There's something for everyone. New venue out at Peoria Sports Complex. This is an event that's been going on long before Aravaipa was a glint in Jamil's eye. It's a Arizona classic. Brings people in from all over the country, often year after year. Some classic, old school guys who've put the old and old school for sure show up to run the 6-day. It's a real gathering of the people, and that'll be fun to live stream.
Well,
for
that
the
race
first
is
time.
older than Aaron.
I know, it is.
Because it started in 1983. So
I remember running. Across the years in the 90s, and it was not quite what it is today, but it still had that sort of special feeling of like ending the year and starting a new year, and I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. I think that's about it. Stick around. Stick around. Stay tuned for Mountain Outpost covering Desert Solstice this weekend, and we'll see you in 2025 as we cover Tan Scramble.
Right on. Cheers, everybody.
Fantastic. We'll see you.